Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Since a lot of you guys seem to like this format, we're going to keep going with it. Today's video, we're going to talk about the cost of mountain bikes and whether or not it's worthwhile upgrading or buying a baller bike and then working with that. But let's jump into it real quick. So as I mentioned in my last video, I am in the process of beginning to look to buy a new bike. And I've made a lot of upgrades to this bike over the past 3.5 years, and I'm happy with it. But I feel like the only thing that's really kind of holding me back right now is the frame. I think the frame needs to be a little bit longer, and I think that's what modern geometry is, what I'm missing and what I'm needing for my bike. But anyone who's gone out and taken a look at bikes recently will realize that it is insane right now what people are charging for full suspension mountain bikes. Most companies aren't even making an aluminum offering anymore. Some do, some don't. And some of them, it's not even like maybe $1,000 difference in price. And so it's barely, a worthwhile change compared to the carbon bikes that they're offering. To give you an example, when I bought my Santa Cruz 5010 back in, I think it was 2018, when I bought that bike, it's that very same version model now on Santa Cruz website is over $1,000 more than what I paid for it back then. And the lowest end model I think you could buy at the time was still like $2,800. And now that $2,800 bike is gone. The lowest price Santa Cruz bike you can buy right now in a 5010, and this is an NX build, is $4,800. That's kind of nuts. When you think about the new e-bike they just released, the lowest end model of that is $8,000. That's nuts too. And that's kind of the situation we've got ourselves in mountain biking, it seems like. There is no real middle ground when you're looking at some of these manufacturers. There are some that you're going to find, like YT has some options, and I think there might be some lower end giants and stuff like that. So there's options that are below $4,000, but at the same time, you got to look at components. You got to look at the material it's made with, and you got to look at do they stand behind their product? And I know that Santa Cruz stands behind their products. So does Ibis. So does Yeti. A lot of companies do. And a lot of companies are making these bikes. But what are your options? Do you go out and buy a full suspension bike, or do you go out and buy a frame and build out a bike? And that's something that I've been debating about for like the last 3 years mentally. Is it better off to buy the cheapest model and then upgrade over time, or are you better off buying a frame, buying all the parts you want, and building that bike itself? Because then at least you get all the parts you want, but it's going to take you probably a little longer and you have to do the work yourself to build it out. And it's interesting because the pricing is kind of fascinating. So that's where I'm going to get into. So I'm a big spreadsheet guy. And so what I did was I listed out a spreadsheet of all the parts that I would want in my bike. And so I was looking at the bike parts and just looking through, and I kind of went down and like, if I had to buy all the parts that I need, and that's a fork, headset, your cockpit, brakes, wheels, drivetrain, it's everything. For me, that comes out to about $4,000 retail in just parts, which is kind of insane. Granted, the majority of that cost is going to be your dropper post, it's going to be your wheels, and it's going to be your fork. Those are the three big things that are the big tickets on your bike. So if you can carry those over, that will take out a lot of the price of buying your parts. So the second part for me was, what if I just did the parts that I think I would want to have new on the bike? So that'd be like a fork, drivetrain, and wheels. and just say, save my money, bring over my brake, bring over the dropper, bring over the cockpit. We'll just keep that stuff, and then we'll just upgrade the parts that kind of deteriorate over time. That's still $2,600. So that's cost of a really, a nice bike, or a low-end bike. So you're still not, when you, just for parts we're talking, you're spending a lot of money on this. And that's where you go down to like, well, okay, what's my next option for saving money? What if I said just drivetrain without the cranks, but with a fork? And that really, as you would expect, if the fork's about $1,000, that brings me down to like $1,600 of just parts. And I think that's doable, but I could go even lower, and that's saying without the fork. Just the bare minimum parts here that you would need to upgrade a bike, just that you'd want to replace, like the bottom bracket, the headset, your drivetrain, just the piece of the drivetrain that actually wear out. That you could do for $600 if you had a bike that had parts you could bring over. So when you look at that and you say, okay, well, I could spend $4,700 on the cheapest Santa Cruz bike, or I could buy a $3,600 frame and spend $4,000 to get all the parts I want. That's a $7,000 bike. That's a lot of money. I don't have that. I don't have that kind of money to spend on bikes. I tell you that much. So, but then I could look at, well, if I took that $3,600 frame and just bought the $600 parts that I needed to just replace, then it's a pretty decent, comparison. Because really, I mean, I look at a bike like a low-end bike like that Santa Cruz. It's got NX drivetrain, so all of that would be pulled off. I mean, wouldn't want it. It's got cheap wheels, bad hubs. So the wheels are not going to come along for the ride. I could deal with the brakes, but honestly, I'd rather take those brakes off my current bike, put them on my old bike, and sell the old bike. So that's another option. It's like, what if I just took parts that I didn't want and put them back on the old bike, sold that, and used that money towards my new bike? Could I spend a little bit more money that way and save money that way? So that's an option too. So looking at what I've done in the past few years to this bike, buying little upgrades over time made sense for me, especially because I had decent brakes on this bike before. When I bought this GX build, the guide ours were fine. There were decent brakes. The GX drivetrain was decent. And I kept most of those parts for a long time. I didn't start really looking to replace things until, a couple of years in. Granted, I might have changed out the cockpit a little bit earlier, pulled the dropper off, but those were things that I thought were mandatory updates. But over time, I've been able to make those minor upgrades over, 3 years and spread that across. So that was a lot more economically affordable for me. But if you're going to buy a new bike, you don't want to buy a bike and then build it up over 3 years. So the question becomes: is it better off to buy exactly what you want, or to build? And for me, I think that what I'm planning on doing is I think I'm going to build my next bike. I haven't, I think I can look for deals, shop for parts, pick up a frame. A lot of times you can buy discounted frames because they're the wrong color, on some sites. So I might be looking at that and save some money there. It's kind of funny because it is true. Like each frame gets a new color each season, and so you also sometimes you see on backcountry.com, you'll see last year's frame for like 30% off because it's last year's color and not this year's color. So it's looking for deals like that, and really bare minimum bringing over, I could probably bring over some of those other parts as well. There are parts of the bike I would not carry over, like the chain, the cassette, the chain ring. You know, I'd probably be hesitant to bring over the bottom bracket. I'd probably be hesitant to bring over the headset. But everything else could probably be brought over. Even the fork. I maintain the fork, so hopefully, I think I could bring that over as long as I don't go 29er. I think that would be totally something I could do. But the rest of it, I would definitely be bringing over my tenant bars, my stem, my pedals. I would like to get a different dropper post, but just to get a little longer post, I got a 150 post and would like to try a 175. But I would bring over the saddle. Maybe not the grips, but I would definitely bring over the brakes. I could bring over the shifter. I could probably bring over the derailleur. And, there's a lot of parts on this that I've upgraded over time that are still in good shape that I could bring to the new bike. It's really just the frame that I'm concerned about. And so that might be what my choice of bikes is going to do next, is I'm going to look at buying the frame and maybe not buying an entire bike. Just because why spend another $1,500, $2,000 just on the parts when I know that I've got good parts on this bike and I can bring over? It's a little bit more work for me, but in the long run, I think I'll be happier. And ideally, I'll only be replacing things as they wear out and not because I don't like the part anymore. So, what are your plans for buying new bikes? Are you thinking about buying a bike next year? Are you looking at, are you going to build your own bike? Are you going to try and find something that's already pre-built and what is your mindset when looking for a bike? Is it just simply, here's the dollar amount I can afford and what can fall under it? Or you do this mental math to say, okay, how do I afford this? Or what's worthwhile? And can I justify this cost over another one? Let me know. Leave a comment down below. I'm interested to hear about it. Hopefully you guys are interested in this conversation. If you want to see more conversations like this, definitely hit the thumbs up. Leave a comment. Let me know what else you guys want to hear me talk about. But I've got a couple ideas. We'll see how this goes. All right. Well, talk to you later. Go ride your bike. Hopefully I'll see you on the trails. Bye.